Live at 5 from the RT News Centre. This hour, a Palestinian Cabinet member is killed in West Bank clashes. As Israeli forces crack down on a crowd of protesters, the Palestinian president is now vowing a response to it. The UN demands action against the people behind the CIA's torture programme, but the US Justice Department refuses to launch criminal charges in the wake of the damning inquiry into multiple abuses. And Germany gets short shrift from French politicians for telling Paris to get its finances in order, with a high-level warning to Berlin to watch its words. A very good evening to you from me, Kevin Owen, here at RT this hour, coming live from Moscow. Our top story then, a senior Palestinian official has died after a confrontation with Israeli soldiers during a protest in the West Bank today. The Palestinian president's already vowed measures in response to Ziad Abu Ain's death. Paul Asli has got this report, and I must tell you too, you may find some of the pictures and images coming up here upsetting.
He is a Fatah official. He was also head of the Palestinian Authority Committee against settlements and the Israeli separation wall. The confrontations were taking place north of Ramallah against the Israeli occupation. Palestinian activists were planting trees. Among them was the minister when these clashes broke out and Israeli soldiers threw tear gas canisters at them. Now, we are receiving reports that one of the soldiers approached Abu Ain and hit him on the chest with his gun. He then collapsed and was taken to hospital in Ramallah and declared dead at the hospital. Now, it is likely that this was due to suffocation. Israeli officials in the last few moments issued a statement in which they say he died of a heart attack, but the Palestinian Authority says it makes no difference. The IDF is awaiting an autopsy. Abu Ain was ill, so there is also the possibility that this contributed to his death. The Palestinian foreign minister, however, says that Israel will pay for his murder. I want to point out that this is part of the regular protests that have been taking place over the past few weeks. This is part of the larger movement that has protested the separation wall during the last 7 years. And just to make the note that 2 days ago, the International Criminal Court granted Palestine observer status, making it now possible for war crimes committed in the West Bank to be investigated and tried. And this could be one of the first such cases.
Well, there's been a string of tit-for-tat violence between Israelis and Palestinians since early November. It all started when a Hamas militant rammed his car into a crowd at a train station. That killed 2 Israelis. 15 Palestinians then were injured in clashes over that disputed holy site in East Jerusalem. On to November the 8th. An Israeli policeman shot dead a Palestinian after he tried to attack policemen in their car. 2 days after that, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed in separate stabbing attacks. And on November the 16th, an Israeli man was killed with a screwdriver in central Jerusalem. The next day, clashes erupted after a Palestinian bus driver was found hanged in a bus. Palestinians blamed the incident then on Israel. Israel's army is looking into the incident, it says, but so far it's not given any comment. We spoke earlier to Mustafa Barghouti from the Palestinian Legislation Council. He says reaction will follow, both from officials and people.
There are popular reactions and official ones. From the popular side, I can assure you that the popular resistance will not stop. It's a struggle for freedom, it's a struggle for dignity and a struggle for our independence. But on the other hand, officially speaking, the Palestinian Authority is required to suspend, and there is a promise that there will be suspension of all forms of security coordination with the Israeli army. And we are demanding that the meeting of the leadership takes the decision to immediately sign the Rome Statute and take Israel to the International Criminal Court. Israel must be held responsible in front of the international law and must be held accountable for the crimes that are committed by its army against the Palestinian population.
The UN's calling for those behind the CIA torture program to be prosecuted. It's after a Senate investigation concluded that post-9/11 interrogation tactics were far more brutal than previously acknowledged, and ineffective too. But the Justice Department isn't planning to press criminal charges, citing a lack of evidence. Well, here are just a few of the violations mentioned in that report. Some detainees were subjected to rectal feeding without medical necessity. In one case, this caused wounds associated with rape. Prisoners were also beaten. They had their feet broken and were then forced to stand for hours nonetheless. Some of them were put into painful stress positions and or deprived of sleep for days. One detainee lost an eye while in CIA custody. And others were reportedly waterboarded too. We've heard that time and again until they almost drowned. Well, the probe also found that at least 26 people were wrongfully held under the CIA's secret interrogation program, and that one suspect died. Yet what's finally been made public after 4 years of wrangling between the CIA and the Senate Intelligence Committee is only a heavily redacted version of the findings. That ran into millions of pages. The names of CIA personnel, for instance, were left out, so no one actually knew who ordered the torture to be carried out. Dates of critical events were erased, making it impossible to find out exactly when these atrocities, these alleged atrocities, took place. Nations that house secret CIA prisons aren't named. They're simply referred to as countries. And it's missing details like these that have apparently led the Department of Justice to decide that not to pursue charges now on grounds of insufficient evidence. We spoke to the head of Human Rights Watch, who's warned that if no one is prosecuted, future US governments could again resort to torture.
President Obama came into office, and as far as we know, he stopped the torture, and that was important. But he's absolutely refused to permit broad investigation of the torture, let alone prosecution of the torturers. Using the slogan, "We're going to look forward, not back," he decided to move on. He had more important things to do than to prosecute this blatant illegality. So unfortunately, we get this important report from the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's an important statement of the truth, but there's no prospect of prosecution. And that's a very dangerous state of affairs, because what that means is that some future president facing a future security threat is going to look at torture as a policy option.
And something else to bring to your attention as well, a development within the past couple of hours. The damning reports pushed Poland now to finally admit hosting a secret CIA prison after years of denying it. The country's former president, Aleksander Kwaśniewski, said that Warsaw did let US intelligence run the detention centre on its territory. But he insists Polish officials didn't authorise the harsh interrogation methods used there. He went on to say that he was told by the US that the facility would be used to obtain information from sources who are willing to cooperate. Well, now, someone listening very carefully to that is Craig Murray, a former British ambassador to Uzbekistan. He's joining us at Live to talk more about it. This must be unfortunate, but nonetheless it must be music to your ears, because you lost your job over your resistance to what you said was going on at the time. You were worried about rendition at the time. You were ambassador, weren't you, to Uzbekistan between 2004 and 2006. You raised your concerns. You basically got the boot because of it. What does this news today feel like to you?
Well, it's nice at last finally to have some official acceptance from the United States that what was happening was happening. As you say, I got sacked for revealing it. And in fact, the rendition flights which went to that secret base in Poland at Shimony, almost every single one of those flights went on and landed in Tashkent in Uzbekistan. And a number of people, when they were finished with in Shimony, were taken on to Uzbekistan. And in Uzbekistan, I believe they were murdered because they were never seen again. So it's nice to have the official admission that things happened. We still have no such admission from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom government is still today denying its complicity with it, unlike the Polish government.
Let's just remember, back then it was Jack Straw and it was Tony Blair basically saying you were inventing this stuff, wasn't it?
They called me a liar directly. They said in Parliament I was a liar. They said there was no such thing as the Extraordinary Rendition Programme. It was a figment of my imagination. I had invented it all. And they sacked me. And I would say that today, Jack Straw has been allowed to deny on news programmes all over the UK that it happened. They're still lying about it.
Could it have been they didn't know?
Not one single UK... No, not at all. The evidence was absolutely overwhelming. I personally sent reports of what was happening in Uzbekistan to Jack Straw, saying the CIA are getting intelligence from torture here directly. He definitely knew. That's why he sacked me. There's no way they didn't know. But I was going on to say that, you know, the cover-up continues. Today, This is the only television interview I'm doing. Jack Straw is being allowed today on all the media to say he knew nothing about it, and not one single, not the BBC, not one single UK media outlet will allow me on to say, I told him about it and I was sacked.
Do you think it's right that so much detail was left out of this report? It was a massive report, but heavily shrunken down, heavily redacted. Was it right that countries weren't named, people weren't named? Do you think, should there have been more meat to this?
There should definitely have been more meat to it. I wouldn't mind people not being named if they were being prosecuted. That would be fine. But for people not to be named so that they are protected from any comeback whatsoever, you know, it is despicable. And also, you should realise the United Kingdom, at ambassador level in Washington, has been lobbying for months in detail to have Britain taken out of the report and references to the UK taken out of the report. And other countries have been doing that too. So it's not just the Americans of their own volition, although they're bad enough, who have redacted this, but the United Kingdom has been actively complicit in reducing the amount that is published.
Do you think we'll get an apology anytime soon from the CIA? After all, this report reveals that 8 terror plots were falsely cited to justify the torture that went on because of it. Will we get a response, an apology, as far as that?
No, I'm afraid we'll never get an apology from the security services. We'll never get a full apology from either the UK or the US governments. And that's a terrible thing. Torture is not the only instance. We are constantly given false reports of non-existent terror plots in order to justify the massive funding of the security services. So torture is not the only aspect of this. This report forensically examines the claims of the security services to have foiled terror plots in which torture were involved and finds that they are lying. They are equally lying about even more terror plots where torture wasn't involved. We are constantly fed lies by the security services about the foiling of terror plots.
Poland's come forward now. Do you think we'll see more countries putting their hands up officially? I was quite pleased that Poland has already come forward. I know Alexander Kwasniewski. I've known him for some time. I'm afraid to say I think he's at the very best turning a blind eye, or at worst lying when he says he didn't know that there was torture going on in that facility. I think that was extremely obvious to everyone. They must have been aware that people were flying out of it to Tashkent and never being seen again. So I think to say Poland has come clean is a bit of an exaggeration. I think they're still lying about it. There is a worry, isn't there, that history can repeat itself. People have been voicing a worry on this programme today that because so much of this report has been kept secret, therefore there's a chance that all this could happen again.
Well, I think you would be naive if you thought it had entirely stopped. And the CIA has probably stopped at the moment using torture directly itself. The CIA is most certainly still getting intelligence from torture, getting other people to do it for them. In Uzbekistan, where I was, CIA operatives were sometimes present during torture, but they didn't actually do the torture. They got the Uzbek government to do it. And I think you'll find for certain. In Bahrain, for example, I know for certain that at the moment in Bahrain, people are being tortured in order to provide evidence to the CIA. It's just the Bahrainis who are doing the torture, not the CIA.
Craig Murray, thanks ever so much. We did you a bit of a disservice at the top there. We said you were in tenure in some wrong dates. You were, in fact, of course, the UK ambassador to Uzbekistan between 2002 and 2004. So we wish you well and thank you for coming on the programme. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Vic.
Coming up here on RT International, pardon my French, France tells Germany to mind its own business and watch its words after being asked to slim down the state. We'll bring you live reaction to that row and a lot more too after this break.
The interview for tomorrow is confirmed. 10 a.m.
A global solution to a global problem.
The people call for a total revamp of the system.
your language. Want news, programs and documentaries in Spanish? What matters to you? Breaking news, alternative angles, hidden stories. Are you here? Then try RT Spanish. Find out more, visit actualidad.rt.com.
Hello again. A row over money's got neighbours France and Germany snapping at each other again. It stems from Angela Merkel accusing France of not doing enough to tighten its budget, not for the first time either. The leader of the French left front reacted furiously, telling the German Chancellor to mind her own business. The French finance minister was a bit more diplomatic. He warned that certain comments coming from Germany are feeding anti-EU sentiment. We spoke to the founder of the German think tank Europolis. He believes that Berlin's objections are moderate and justified, though.
France is a very sensitive country as far as its sovereignty is concerned, and France and French politicians like to give lessons to other countries, in particular to Germany, which has remained, if not a rival, but at least a competitor. But they don't want to be reminded of the fact that France is failing, and has been failing for quite some years by now, to be in compliance with the deficit rules. So what the Chancellor said, the German Chancellor said, is a commonplace. It's an objective statement, and as a matter of fact, the European Commission will undergo at the beginning of next year some sort of credibility test to show that the Commission has the authority to make France comply. And we will see what will be prevailing, the authority of Brussels or France, the French sense of sovereignty. Anyway, Germany is not in that game.
On a lighter note now, getting bored, twiddling your thumbs means something very different now, of course, that many of us have got smartphones to distract us. But you'd expect people who are supposed to be deciding on vital national decisions not to be doing that too much, to pay a bit more attention to the job in hand rather than the device in hand, if they could get away with it. Here's Anastasia Cherkina.
Candy Crush, the uber-popular game that is played over 1 billion times every single day throughout the world. The mission is to match tiny, tasty delights of the same color. Simple and sweet. A way for many to kill a few spare minutes. And here's Conservative MP Nigel Mills doing just that at a parliamentary hearing on pensions. The public disapproved and an apology ensued. The company behind the game wasn't surprised by what happened.
In fairness, all of the politicians have said that there are dull moments in Parliament. Candy Crush is the ideal way to combat boredom for a few minutes.
Except in this case, Mills played for 2.5 hours. RT also got in touch with the company.
We're delighted that people from all walks of life enjoy playing Candy Crush so much. However, like all things, there's a time and a place.
This latest incident of highly paid British public officials doing the wrong thing at the wrong time is not the first by far. From playing air guitar during another session, to getting in some extra minutes of shut-eye during a debate on war. In this image, 4 out of 13 MPs are captured being enthralled by their electronic devices. And last but not least, a musical tie breaking up a session may just be a winner for political credibility.
If we are to have a credible debate...
Anastasia Cherkina, RT, London.
Well, the shamed MP won't face any action, but the person who took the picture could lose their job. The House of Commons has launched an investigation because taking pictures like that breaches parliamentary rules, although some MPs saying holding an inquiry is pointless and nonsense too. In any case, media commentator Neil Wallace says the bigger picture, MPs should be focusing on the more vital issues at hand anyway, not their laptops or their Candy Crush games.
I think you can laugh at this. And many will, but there is an underlying serious point, isn't it? This is a guy who's been elected to Parliament, he's being paid a lot of money, he's sitting in a very important committee, actually, and I'm afraid if you can't go into a debate in the Houses of Parliament and actually sit and listen, and that if instead you're playing computer games, well, you don't really deserve to be there. What disturbed me far more is that the idea that instead of kicking him off the committee, they're trying to find the person who told the rest of us how this guy is taking our money, taxpayers' money, to sit there and play computer games.
He is not alone, though. British lawmakers aren't the only ones having trouble concentrating. This is Catalonia's economy minister here. Seems to find the newspaper a bit more interesting than parliamentary sessions in Barcelona at that snapshot anyway. This, meantime, is a Russian deputy in the State Duma. Seems to be glued to a tablet. This is a French politician tempted by the front page of a magazine. And this, well, it was just all too much for him. The Czech foreign minister took a little snooze by the looks of it. Filming's only just begun on the new James Bond movie, but the producers have already shaken and stirred 9 luxury cars which were about to be used in the latest 007 blockbuster have gone missing. They've been stolen from a garage in Germany. Where have they gone? We try and dig deeper on our site, try and find out the mystery there. Also, 2 so-called weather bombs struck the north of Britain, along with hundreds of lightning bolts. You should see the headlines. Thousands of homes have been left without electricity. It is serious if you're up north. Batten down the hatches. More on our website, rt.com. It was supposed to be a light show to promote a movie premiere, but instead it's incurred the wrath of the church and the wrath of the public too. The evil eye of Sauron from The Lord of the Rings was planned to loom large on one of Moscow's tallest skyscrapers before the opening of the third Hobbit film, but not anymore. Earlier I spoke with RT's social media editor, Ivor Crotty, who has his eye on this ongoing story.
The idea was that this eye would be pitched on top of one of the towers in Moscow City, which is, you know, the Moscow downtown. Things didn't quite work out that way. The group that was going to install the eye is a group called Zvechenia. So it seems to be 6 people involved in that, Moscow-based. And there are a bunch of architects, designers, collaborators, artists working in the new Moscow public spaces. As you know, the parks have been renovated massively over the last few years, and the guys have done some great installations there.
It was a pre-publicity for this film, but it never made it up the top of the tower. Doesn't even go that far, no?
No, unfortunately, because it was one of those stories that everybody wanted it so much to happen, but it was never going to happen, I guess. Yeah. Some of the organisations, civic organisations and the church got involved and said they weren't really terribly happy about the idea of, to use the quote from the chaplain for the Orthodox Church, triumphant evil flying over the heart of the Moscow financial district. The
Russians are a religious breed. Russia's a religious place. What's the reaction been on the Twitter sphere about this? Is it that maybe it should move with the times a bit? Maybe you should look at it, this was just a PR stunt? Or is the general consensus that it was the right thing to do not to put it there? What are people saying generally?
You know, there's no such thing as bad publicity, Kevin. Everybody knows the film is launching.
Indeed we do. A new mobile app's been launched in Germany for activists seeking to counter far-right nationalists. It keeps track of extremist rallies, allowing users to organise counter-protests. RT's Jacob Piskunov looked more closely at how it all works then.
With Germany being among the European countries receiving refugees coming from the Middle East and Syria, it seems the country has been witnessing a rise in far-right activities. For instance, here in Berlin, nationalist rallies have been taking place on Mondays, with the last one reportedly gathering several hundred people. And they present themselves as citizens concerned about the refugee issue, but activists warn this is merely camouflage and an excuse for them to spread their ideology, and are sounding the alarm, saying that much more needs to be done in order to tackle the spread of these ideas. Well, one NGO called Berlin Against Nazis decided to take this fight to a whole new level and released a mobile application aimed at tracking these nationalist rallies down, informing the public about exactly where they take place so that anyone against them could come there and show their protest.
If the app would be like a tool which informs all Berliners and even non-Berliners about what's going on, when and where. There's an orange line and a brown line. The orange line is a protest against the Nazis, and there's like a brown mark and a brown line of the Nazis. Berlin has to host an increasing number of refugees, and these people take it as an excuse to show in public their racist opinion, together with citizens who are also, well, at least a little open to that.
An Android version of the app came out first, and it's already been downloaded by around 1,500 people, while the version for Apple product users is expected to come out in the nearest future. Igor Piskunov, RT, Berlin.
The so-called anti-Nazi app's already got some reaction on Google Store. Many users welcome the new software, saying the idea is great. Others, though, hint that the app could actually be used to help the extremists. This user's outraged, claiming that the tool is discriminatory and should be banned. The last leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has proposed now a 5-step plan to end the unrest in East Ukraine. First off, he says a sustained ceasefire is essential for peace in the region. Next, he says both sides should abide by the Minsk peace plan agreed in September. Gorbachev also calls for the creation of an international aid committee for the war-torn East. And he says Kiev and the self-proclaimed republics must end their blame game and work on restoring mutual trust. Meantime, the latest attempt at a sustained ceasefire has now held for more than 24 hours. Germany's foreign minister has expressed optimism about the peace process in Ukraine.
I believe that the peak of the military confrontation in Ukraine is behind us, and I hope that this holds true for the coming weeks. And we have to work to make sure that those conflicts that I have described will not lead to a new split between the East and the West, and that we won't end up in a new Iron Curtain.
The next live update from us, 34 minutes from now, with me, Kevin Owen. In fact, I'll still be here then. After the break, though, hope you enjoy our next programme. We've got views coming up on why Americans aren't feeling all that positive about the economy right now in the latest edition of Boom Bust with Erin.